Introducing the remarkable archetype, the dangerous gentleman. With a demeanor that commands respect and a hint of potency, he embodies strength tempered by virtue. Though his capabilities could veer towards danger, he channels his power for noble causes, serving others and safeguarding those in need. Rooted in a profound love for both God and humanity, he navigates life with discipline and purpose. In his presence, one witnesses the harmonious blend of power and benevolence, a testament to the true essence of masculinity. Step into the world of the dangerous gentleman, where strength is wielded for righteousness, and discover a captivating embodiment of honor and valor. Greetings, and welcome to Storytime with the Dangerous Gentleman. Yes, I am the Dangerous Gentleman. No, I did not give myself that nickname, but I certainly did earn it. To get a little business out of the way, since we're now doing this more on YouTube, this is the Storytime episode of the week. One episode a week. I generally do more of a commentary, like a monologue kind of a thing, and then one episode, usually comes out on Friday, is more of a story-based episode, something out of my life where I learned some valuable lessons and that I think that you can learn too. So with all the new people, I'd like to encourage you to like the video, share the video, and comment on the video. Tell other people about it, because if you like it, then obviously it's worth your time, so it might be worth someone else's. A couple of things that I've noticed as I've progressed going through this podcast, and at somewhere 70 or 80 episodes in now, is that I didn't intend to talk about politics a lot, and I didn't intend to talk about religion a lot. But over the course of time, I've realized that I can't leave those things out of my life, because they are a huge piece of who I am, and they have shaped me in some very real and powerful ways. And not just the ideas of politics, not just the ideas of spirituality and theology, but boots on the ground kind of stuff, where I see it in action. That's going to be the basis of the story for today. And as many of you know, in just under 2 weeks, we are facing a very critical day in our nation's history. It is Election Day. And this one could end up setting the course of this country for the next several decades, if not a century or longer, right? We have a choice between going one way and going another way. And this episode isn't to talk about the way that I think it should go. Although if you've listened to me talk, you probably have a good idea of which way I'm bent. We're going to talk more about how important things like voting and making a difference in your community is, and making a difference beyond just voting. So, but the first thing, before we get too far down on the road, I'm going to encourage you, vote. You go vote. You take your neighbor to vote. You take your friend to vote. Make a big deal out of it. Plan on getting a big group of people together, going to vote, and then going out to dinner, going out to lunch, having a party, watching election results. Make it a big deal. I remember for me, the first time I got to vote was, it was 1990, I turned 18 after the election of 1994. So after that is when I started to vote. And the community that I grew up in was really big on voting. All of the teenagers were encouraged to vote. They would talk to us about the issues that were on the table. And then, we would all go in and vote as a group. And we lived outside of this small town. So we would all go into this little town and we'd all get in line. That was back when you actually got in line. And I actually prefer it that way. You actually got in line and you went and you cast your ballot. And it was a big deal. It was highly encouraged. And as a matter of fact, if people found out that you didn't vote, you'd get a little bit of a talking to. Now, I'm not going to comment on whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing. I do think it is our biblical duty to cast our vote. And I do also think and believe that if you don't vote in elections, especially on the local level, then you really shouldn't get a say in what's going on politically. If you couldn't even do the minimum of casting your vote for who you thought should be in charge, or the issues that you thought, like the direction you thought that your city county, state, country should go, then you really shouldn't get a say. So make a big deal out of it. Vote. It's a big deal. Get the people out there who don't usually vote, get them out there. I've heard some pretty remarkable statistics that something like 40 to 50% of evangelical Christians don't vote. And like I said, if you don't cast your ballot, if you don't vote, then you don't get a say. So if 40 to 50% of the evangelical Christians in this country don't vote, then they don't get to complain about politics when it doesn't go their way. Because that's a big voting block. If that particular voting block decided to all push towards one direction, we'd see some change in this country, right? So it's a big deal. Get people to register to vote. You're running out of time to register to vote. There's some shenanigans going on across the country that, again, that's not the topic of this podcast, but there are some shenanigans going on around the country where people who really shouldn't get a right to vote are getting pushed to being able to have a vote. And that's not okay in my book. And if there were anything I could do about it, I would do something. Well, I am doing something about it right now. I'm voicing my opinion. I'm getting it out there that I don't think that, first of all, illegal. And if you're not a citizen of this country, I don't think you should vote. You shouldn't get to vote. 100% hands down. No questions. If you're not a citizen of this country, you don't get to vote. You don't get to walk into a club that you're not a part of. And if they're having an election, you don't get to go in there and say, hey guys, I think that this club that I'm not even a part of should go in this direction. No one would let you do that. Why should we do that? Why should we think about that in any different way when we're talking about our country? If you walked into a church and they're trying to elect a new pastor, they're trying to choose a new pastor, and you get a whole bunch of new people that walk in that day that aren't members of that church, and they decide that someone, one of their friends, should be the pastor or the leader of the church, but they're not members there, but they just say, hey, we have enough people, we're going to vote for this guy. That's the same thing that people are trying to pull. So illegals shouldn't get a chance to vote. I think if you don't pay taxes, that maybe you shouldn't vote. I'm not going to say that for sure, but it would be a way to kind of make sure that people who actually have a stake in the country and the way that things are supposed to go would actually have the most say in this country. Pay taxes, have a job, things like that. Like there should be more qualifications, not less. But when I was 18, I got to go vote for the first time, and it was a big deal. I wore my little sticker, cool. And I remember one time where I completely spaced it throughout the day. I was working hard, and it was hot that day, and I got to the end of the day, and I went home after work, and I was exhausted. And then I was like, oh, crap. I didn't vote yet. And I jumped in my car, and I sped to the nearest voting place, and I cast my ballot because it was that important to me. And that's what was ingrained into me growing up. But it wasn't just voting that was a big deal for me growing up. We got involved in local politics. We were encouraged to do things. There was a local business that allowed us to use their bank of phones, and we would go in the weeks up to elections, and we would make phone calls to registered voters, encouraging them to vote and talking to them about the issues. So we used to do that once a week for several weeks leading up to the election. We would go in and make these phone calls. And then we would also go into town and we would walk door to door in groups, usually in pairs of two. And we would walk around neighborhoods and we would knock on people's doors. It's called doorbelling. We'd ring the doorbell. We'd talk to them we'd encourage them to vote. We'd talk to them about the issues and the candidates and things like that. So we got people out to vote, and we helped to encourage people to actually make a difference. We were moving the needle a little bit. We'd go march in parades. We'd wear t-shirts. We'd put yard signs in our yard and all that stuff. So it was a really big deal for me when I was a teenager and a young adult. Then I moved away and I went to college, and I still voted. Actually, it was kind of cool. One year when I was going to Eastern Washington University where I did my undergrad, they asked for volunteers. We actually got paid for it. We worked for the Associated Press. They cleared out one of the big multi-purpose rooms at the university, and they set up these banks of computers and phones and stuff like that. And then they hired all these students, and we went and we manned these phones and these computers, and we were getting election results from all over the country. They were calling into this call center, and we were recording the results and confirming the results, and we were like chasing people down, and we were like right there on the front lines, and we were getting results faster than other people. So we knew what was going on. It was the 2004 election. So we knew what was going on before other people did, which was kind of a fun experience. Anyway, then I went away to school, to graduate school, and I got married and started having kids. Yes, I still voted, but I was not nearly as involved as I had been in the past. And I still kept up with things, but I really wasn't paying attention to what was going on. And then it was 2016. And that was the year, if you've paid attention in the past, that's the year that my life was falling apart. My kids were gone and living with my sister. My ex was running around doing drugs and all kinds of crazy stuff. And I wasn't doing a whole lot better. But I remember election night, and I remember that Donald Trump was running, and it was Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton. But I really didn't really have my finger on the pulse of things very much. I just kind of had a peripheral idea of what was going on. So that night, I was driving around, I was doing mail deliveries in my car, and I'm kind of paying attention to the election results, and my ex is she's ranting, she's on some paranoid rant about this, that, and the other thing about Russians and Donald Trump, and then found out that Donald Trump was won, and I was like, cool. I just was kind of like, cool. Then 2017 is when my life started to get put back together, and I moved to Yakima, and I met a group of people who were really involved in politics. And I started to pay attention to more things. I started to really see and to dive into what was really actually going on, both on the surface and under the surface, both on a federal level, state level, county, but also very much on the city level. Because the group that I'm associated with, the group of people here, they're very heavily involved in politics. And we joke, we want to take over Yakima, the city of Yakima and Yakima County. My friend is very ambitious about that kind of thing. And so I kind of started to buy into that, and I started to realize how important all this stuff was. I went through my libertarian phase, right? They say that if you're smart and you're a young man, you're going to go through a libertarian phase where I believed that people should just be free to do what they want, that the government wasn't supposed to legislate morality and all that stuff. But over time, as I matured a little bit, I started to study a little bit more. I started to see more what the Bible actually had to say about this stuff, and seeing the direction of the country. I was like, the thing that turned it for me was that somebody said to me, because I would use the term, we shouldn't legislate morality. But somebody said to me one time, they said, all legislation is moral. It's just a matter of whose morality is being legislated. And once I realized that, once that kicked in my brain, I was like, we do, on some level, need to legislate morality. These certain things are wrong. Certain things are just wrong. And it needs to be illegal. I'm not going to make a big, long list of what those things are. But like I said, if you know my history, you're going to probably figure out what side of things I land on. But all legislation is moral. So let's make it ours. Let's make it God's legislation. Let's make it God's morality. And so that's what flipped the switch to realizing that this politics is a spiritual issue. Politics is something that it is our duty and responsibility as Christians, not just Christians, but as good people. It's something that should be vitally important to us, because if we don't steer the direction, if we don't make an influence, then someone else will, right? And so I started to hang out with these people, and I started to realize some of the crazy stuff they were doing, and I actually liked it. And I started to see the difference. I'm not going to name the people who were doing it. I'm not going to give too many details, but my friend called me up one night. He's like, hey, we're going to go do this thing. I want you to come with us. And I was like, well, what are we doing? It's like, well, we're delivering a magazine. I was like, what are you talking about? So I went over to his house because I was intrigued. And I get to his house, and there's a group of 6 or 8, maybe 10 people. And he's got boxes of magazines that he and other people wrote themselves. They put together, they edited, they published, they formatted this whole magazine, and they had it printed, and they had 1,000 copies or 1,500 copies. And so what we would do then is we would wait until it was dark, and then we would take these boxes of magazines and we would go deliver them to people's doorsteps. And they were about everything from local politics to national politics to state politics. There was a fiction section, there was commentary, there was just straight up news. And I was like, this feels like we're doing something. You could count on the idea that the day after we would deliver this magazine, people would post about Facebook about this magazine showing up on their doorstep. And some people are mad about it. Some people are cool with it. Some people are like, this is the kind of stuff that gets out. And I went and did this several times. And then I started to notice and follow what was going on in the cultural zeitgeist, what was going on locally. And I started to pay attention. I actually wrote an article for the magazine one time, but it started to make a difference. But we were having issues with publishing and finding people to print it and all of this stuff. And we put out several issues, and it really got me excited. It got me asking questions. It got me paying attention in ways that I never had before. I was voting with more intention. I was paying attention to the issues and the people I was voting for on all kinds of levels. And I was making a difference. I wasn't just voting. I was putting in the work to actually make a difference in my community. Probably the first time I did that was maybe 2018, 2019. We did it a couple times a year between 2018 and now. And then this last year, in 2023, a lot of things kind of came to a head. And we actually bought our own printer, and we changed the format of the magazine. It was now smaller, but we had the printer, we had the paper, we had seized the means of production. So we could print and staple and fold and copy all of our own magazines. Our local city council has not been great. Local city council has voted on some things and made some decisions that were not good, right? It was a 5-2 city council, 5-2 of one of more liberal people and 2 that were more common sense. And we knew that we were pretty solid about at least flipping one of those. But we decided to focus our efforts on a couple of different districts. And one of them, there was somebody who was running, who was the incumbent. She called herself a conservative, but she always voted on the liberal side of things. Very pro that side of things. And so she was basically what you would call a rhino. She got the endorsement of the Republican Party, and she was the incumbent. So she was heavily favored to win. But there was another guy who was a solid Catholic conservative who was sick and tired of the way politics were going, and he decided to run. Odds heavily stacked against him. But a cool, solid guy. Very much an ally. And so we decided, against conventional wisdom, that we were going to put our efforts behind this guy. Now, it wasn't like we endorsed him. He didn't commission us. We weren't working in direct cahoots with each other, but we decided that we were going to put our efforts into trying to get this guy elected. So in our neighborhood, in the district, it's actually the district that I live in. By this time, I had been promoted, and I gave myself this title. I was the Chief Executive Distribution Officer, because I was in charge of coordinating the teams and the efforts and the areas where we were going to go and deliver and distribute this magazine. And so we started to print the magazine, started to get groups together. We started to hit the district that he was in hard. I'm not exactly sure how many people live in the district or how many voters there are, but by the end of the day, between me and my team, we hit 2,500 to 3,000 houses. Sometimes it was a matter of me getting up in the morning and I would walk around my neighborhood and toss magazines. Sometimes I would get home late at night and I would drive to another neighborhood and I would deliver by myself. And sometimes it was groups of people. But we delivered between 2,500 and 3,000 magazines. And this guy that was the candidate, he was doing the same kind of thing. He hit every single door in the neighborhood at least once. getting out and talking to people. So he put in a lot of work, and his labor was mixed with our work. And guess what happened in the end? Well, if I'm telling the story, you probably already realize we flipped that district. Even though he is a Republican running as a Republican against a Republican who was endorsed by the Republican Party and is the incumbent, the work he put in combined with the work that we put in, we flipped that seat. And it would have been still Republican, but this is a solid 100% common sense Republican guy. In the end, we flipped that city council from 5-2 liberal to 5-2 conservative. Right? And in our city, in the city of Yakima, the city council selects the mayor. So they appoint someone to be mayor, the city council votes on it, so if they have the majority, they pick the mayor. Whoever has the majority picks the mayor. And so in this particular case, we also changed the mayor of Yakima. And I won't get into all the decisions that they've made since then, but they have made some very positive changes in the city of Yakima. And so I'm telling you all of this because I want to encourage all of you, especially the men, especially the heads of households, the young fathers, the young men who are looking to make a better life for them and their family, to get involved, to do more than just vote, because you can. Yakima is a city of about 95 to 100,000 people. We flipped that city council. So this city of 95 to 100,000 people, which is not a small city, we flipped that. We made a very specific difference because that guy won. And guess how much he won by? About 150 to 200 votes, which is solid, right? When you're considering the number of voters, but it's not a huge amount. And when you consider that we deliver 2,500 to 3,000 magazines, all we had to do, all that had to happen based on our efforts was for us to flip 100 votes, because that means 100 votes less for her and 100 more votes for him, which makes that 200 vote difference. So if 1 in 10 of our magazines made a difference, we made a difference because we hit about 3,000 houses. And there was some solid information in there that could convince a voter. So what I'm encouraging you, yes, I already said, get out and vote. Take other people to vote. But find ways that you can make a difference because you can. It is our duty as Christians, as men, as citizens, as patriots, as husbands and fathers, it is our duty to do as much as we can in order to move the needle, even in the course of politics. A lot of people don't like to talk about politics, but it is our duty, it is our responsibility to do everything we can to move that needle. And I'm telling you right now that you can make a difference, because if a little group of people, like the group that consistently showed up, there's a dozen people that are involved. And a dozen people made a huge difference in flipping this city. You can make a difference. Don't think that it's not worth the effort, because it absolutely is. Go beyond just talking. Go beyond just posting on Facebook, posting on Twitter, posting on Instagram about how you want the world to change. Get out there and make a difference. Vote with your ballot and vote with your feet. Find other people who want to help. You go find the other people. Don't wait for them to find you, because there are people out there in every city. If we could do this in every city of this size or smaller or even bigger, we could make a difference that would affect states, that would affect regions, that would eventually spread to where we could affect this country. Because, like I said before, there's 40 million evangelical Christians who didn't even vote. They won't even vote. Could you imagine if those 40 million, or 40%, it's 40% of those people, which equates to tens of millions of people. If all of those people voted, we could make a difference. But if those tens of millions of people put in the same amount of effort that we did on a local level, we could change cities. We could change the block. We could change the neighborhood. We could change the district. You could change the city. It can be done because I know that it can be done because we did it. And if we can do it, and there are people with greater resources and greater numbers than we have, we can do it. You can do it. And that's kind of the message of my whole podcast. If I can change my life and if I can make the differences that I have, and there's nothing special about me, then you can change your life. If our little group of people, and there really isn't anything super special about us, we learned everything as we went, right? Like none of us are professional writers. None of us are professional graphic designers. None of us are printers. None of us are professional in the political sphere or in any of the ways that we actually work. But we learned, we put in the time, we put in the effort, and we did it. And so if we can, with our little ragtag group of people, can make a difference in a city of 100,000 people, then you can make a difference in your county, in your neighborhood. Especially you men. This is the purpose, right? We talked about masculinity, right? This is something that gives men purpose. You will find purpose in doing this and in doing things like this. It will fill that hole in your soul that nothing else will. I'm very passionate about this because I've seen it. I've seen what my life was like without it, and I've seen what my life is like with it. You can make a difference. You should make a difference. Political rant over. Once again, I'm going to repeat to you that if you like this at all, if there's anything out of it, anything that you got out of it that you find helpful, drop a comment, like the video, share the video, reach out to me personally. I'd love to have more of a conversation about it. Hit me up in the comments, send me a DM, follow my socials down in the description. And if you want to change your life, you can. I'll talk to you later.
So if you like this content, please give it a rating, a review, and share it with your friends. Also, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about me and what I'm all about and what I can maybe do for you, check out my website at thedangerousgentleman.org. That's thedangerousgentleman.org. Thank you for listening.